Andreessen Horowitz recently released a study showing that enterprise AI adoption is not lagging behind the way that is normally talked about. And in this study, they looked at startups and looked at how many of the big companies, especially Fortune 500 companies, are invested in projects with AI startups that are past the pilot stage, active contracts that are being serviced by these AI startups. And they found that 29% of Fortune 500 companies are invested in these startups' work. They're buying their services and executing the AI that is offered by these services. However, I think this is a bit misleading because what's normally talked about when we talk about enterprise AI adoption lagging behind in terms of what the tech is capable of today, we're normally talking about the idea that AI is not yet deployed as proper infrastructure within enterprises. It's being used by individuals to do work that those individuals do that can result in big productivity gains in some cases, but it's not really transforming the fundamental way that the enterprises work. And why this is important is because the fact is that AI is capable of changing the way that enterprises fundamentally operate today. AI can actually remake the entire infrastructure of enterprises, even as the tech exists today, let alone what could be possible in 6 months to a year and down the road. And what's really happening here is really worth digging into. When we talk about AI adoption being slow in enterprises, we see things from McKinsey and Gartner, for example, discussing this issue. What's normally cited is that CEOs and other leaders are not seeing the gains from AI that they think possible. And even though the majority of companies are adopting AI in some capacity, most of those projects are being stalled and not moving past the pilot phase. So on the surface, the Andreessen report directly contradicts this. And what they find is in sectors like legal and healthcare, for example, which are normally very slow to adopt new software solutions, it's the opposite. They're actually the fastest to adopt new solutions. And in the legal sector, for example, there's a huge amount of spending on the Harvey AI solution, which automates a lot of the legal, clerical, and research work that formerly was done by a lot of junior associates. That's just one example of where you do have a lot of adoption. But I want to talk about what it really means to deploy AI as infrastructure in an enterprise, because it's really worth digging into when we think about what the future looks like for enterprises. Because the fact is that this is in some ways similar to the move from on-premise software to cloud computing, but in some ways the infrastructure change is less complicated and in some ways it's more complicated. So let's unpack that. When the companies around the world switched to cloud computing and switched to using cloud software, and this was where, software as a service model was really born out of this revolution. When this happened, what was really the bottleneck here? Well, at the time, companies had different offices maybe around the world if they're a big enterprise, and in each of these offices they ran software that did various tasks. So let's look at like CRMs, for example. So in the lowest tech scenario, you had each individual office running its own data. Sometimes this data wasn't at all similar across different offices, and sometimes the software solution wasn't the same. And in the better case, maybe you had some form of centralization where it could be like the company managed their own servers and things were deployed on those servers, but they still had to migrate them to a cloud environment. Now, when cloud computing really took off, there was a very obvious case to be made that this would really revolutionize the way enterprises run. And it did. But it took a lot of time. And the reason it took time is because a lot of these systems had to be remade from the ground up. Because if you had different offices using different softwares and entering data in different ways and storing data in different ways, you had to standardize that. And you had to really solve like, okay, we've got 10 different databases in 10 different places, and they all are structured differently. We have to make them all structured the same. We then have to take all that data and put it onto a cloud instance and, of course, retrain everyone. But the retraining component was relatively simple. And that's the biggest difference with AI. Because the fact is, when you look at the infrastructure on a technological level that needs to happen for enterprises to adopt AI, there's not as much as you might think. I mean, we're really already there in most cases. What I mean is that AI is very good at working with unstructured data. And so if you have a CRM, you have a customer ticket management, like a support system that your success team uses, maybe you have a billing protocol, a billing system that's also processing customer data. So you have all these different places that are processing customer data. And so, you would think that, okay, if we want AI to interact with all these systems, whether I want to surface insights or run agents that do various parts of the tasks, then I need to standardize these systems. Well, you actually don't really, because the AI is capable of reading data that exists in different places and understanding it, because that's how AI functions. I can give it unstructured data and just say, make sense of this, and it's capable of making sense of it. So the infrastructure that needs to change is surprisingly little. Now, there is a lot that has to happen in terms of governance and auditing and risk management, things like that. And this is where you do need some additional skills. However, there are people that have those skills that can build these things, and a lot of companies are moving forward. So to give a really specific example, so if you're running some sort of sales agent, for example, you need to make sure in an extreme case that this sales agent is not promising people 90% discount pricing. That's pretty obvious, right? But if you're running AI, that's a real concern. How do we know that the AI is going to tell the customer the right thing? Could we have a legal exposure because of what they say? Could we have a pricing exposure because of what they say? Could we have a brand exposure where it's just making us look like we don't know what we're doing or showing our brand incorrectly? There's all sorts of concerns that are there when it comes to enterprise deploying this system. And this is just in a sales type of example, but this same thing holds true for any kind of finance work, legal work, procurement work, HR work, coding work, whatever it is. You have risks when you're running systems that are doing work on their own, obviously. And so you need to govern these. You need to see what they're doing. You need to be able to audit them. You need to see who signed off on which decisions. And you need to manage how they're actually going to be allowed to be deployed. You need guardrails in place. There's all sorts of cybersecurity issues that come into play. So there's a lot of governance issues. However, those are mostly solvable. I mean, you need a handful of talented people that work on these things that can figure it out, and problem solved. So the bigger issue, though, is really in defining what does the modern workforce look like in the next 6 months, 1 year, 5 years when AI is fully adopted. Because here's what it does look like is you no longer will have teams that are as big as they are today. And let me unpack that. Right now, there's this strange thing that's happening where startups and solopreneurs are 100 to 1,000 times as capable at executing and the speed they execute at versus an enterprise. And the reason is because they don't have a lot of those same risks. If AI systems break, they don't break at the same scale. They're not as catastrophic, and they don't need as many people to sign off on deploying AI. And so I can build something in 2 days that took a company of 50 engineers maybe 6 years to build previously. And that really is true today. And I'm including a lot of QA and things like that need to happen. Now, I'm not saying that the role of the developer is not there, and I'm not saying anybody can do this because that's misleading, but I am saying that a skilled developer that knows how to create products can basically do the job of 50 people in 50 times as fast. That's just the reality today. And as the models get smarter, this is going to be even more true. But what is also true is that means that these enterprises are going to need to reassess what a team even means. Meaning, what you need to do if you're an enterprise is start thinking about every department that you have being split into smaller teams, and within those smaller teams, giving them, on the one hand, more narrowly defined parameters of what they're focused on, but on the other hand, telling them and enabling them to dream and imagine much more compelling results that they can get within that narrow stream of focus. So, for example, take a support team. Instead of having one big support team of 50 people all doing different work, take those same 50 people, split them into 10 different teams of 5 people each, train them all on how to use AI, and this is a big question of how you do this, and give them all a narrow focus within support, break that job up into smaller components, and then within each of those components, those individuals can be empowered to achieve much bigger and bolder outcomes that were previously possible. Because this is what the enterprises of the future look like. It's fewer people doing much more imaginative, visionary, and impactful work, and all of that being coordinated together within the enterprise. Now, this is very easy to say and very hard to transition. So that is where the real infrastructure change is happening for enterprises. The real infrastructure change for enterprises in the AI era is not as much about technology and infrastructure of technology as it is about infrastructure of psychology of the workforce, reimagining what their jobs even mean, right? If I am a support agent, I need to completely transform what I think about of my job. If today my job is coming in and answering customer emails, that shouldn't be my job. And I mean that starting today. That should no longer be my job. I need to start thinking differently that my job is now to use AI to achieve bigger outcomes and a bigger scope, but knowing that I'm still in the mix managing a lot of the decision-making processes that have to happen and a lot of the human processes that need to be signed off on. And now I want to talk for a second about real skill development in the AI era, because what's happening is that humans are starting to be able to be imaginative. What that means is I think most people are capable of imagining very big things, very interesting things, very compelling things within their domain of expertise. The main reason that they can't always implement those things is a skills issue, and generally it revolves around a handful of technical skills, right? Because most people can probably imagine an amazing application if given the opportunity to do so. And if they can use AI and they can see it come to life in front of them and they can give feedback and they can change how it works right in front of them, they can really develop something amazing. Previously, the issue is that people were blocked by the fact that they didn't have a number of different technical skills that would take a long time to acquire. And because they were blocked, they stopped imagining. But now you can imagine again, and you can create much more compelling things. However, there's still a big limitation today that's going to go away within the next probably 9 months to 18 months, maybe faster. And that is systems thinking. Because today, if I want to deploy AI and achieve a great result, I still need to be capable of thinking about all the AI I'm deploying as being an integrated system and diagnosing and workshopping which AI agents I need to deploy and how they connect together and how they orchestrate. And so a great way to illustrate like how this technology is changing is that not so long ago, there was a whole industry built around building workflows in N8N or Zapier or Make. Now you don't see as much talk about that. And why is that? It's because of the capabilities of the models. Because what happens is as the models advance, the narrowness in which you need to build those models starts to deteriorate. Meaning like today, if I want to deploy, for example, like a sales agent that does a full job end to end of researching, finding and researching leads, contacting them, organizing in the CRM, setting up appointments, having the appointments with them and trying to sell them the product, and then handing it over to a account engineer, account manager to close the deal. Let's say I want to create that agent. Well, I need to be a systems thinker and think about how to create each of those agents, because each agent should handle like a thin slice of that work. I can't just tell the AI, hey, do this job. I need to tell it, okay, I need to create an agent that scrapes this website for leads. Then I need to create an agent that takes those leads and analyzes them and enriches the data so that I know what emails I'm sending to. Then I need an agent that drafts the emails based on certain signals. Then I need an agent that reviews those drafts and optimizes and improves them. Then I need an agent that does a quality control to make sure there's no mistakes with their name or anything embarrassing that makes it look like AI. Then I need an agent, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of different agents, and I need to picture in my head how they all connect together, where they might break down, how to audit each one of them, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the state of AI today. And so for enterprises that want to deploy AI, you need to figure out, you need to train your people today to be like systems engineers and to be AI experts. But that's going away. As models get more capable, you're going to be able to one-shot these types of workflows end to end, so that pretty soon you're going to be able to tell AI, I want you to do sales. I only want to be involved when you're going to send an email. I want to review the final draft before you send it. Go. And that model plus the tooling capabilities that are being more and more programmed into these systems is going to be capable of fully building that workflow end to end and executing it. So what it means is that the human in the loop, the individual worker, now can be encouraged to really imagine the possibilities and just have the technology do the work for them. And so that's where we're headed. So in summary, enterprises are lagging behind in AI adoption because there's an entire transformation that has to take place that's psychological in nature, not fundamentally technological. And that change, that transformation, is that individual people need to start thinking and imagining what they can do using the tech to do it, and no longer just be the skills executor. And as that happens, the enterprise itself needs to transform how it works so that it's seeing itself as small teams that are each doing bigger and bigger work in a narrowly defined realm and region of the company. That's what has to happen for true transformation to happen on an enterprise level.